So folks are joining. Welcome, everybody. This is Art Viewing Adventures. We're in our little warm-up period. I'm Rodney Paul, joined by my good friend, Jeanette Pettibone. How are you doing today, Jeanette?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. I know you had a busy weekend.
Yeah.
I had a busy weekend.
Yep.
We thought we'd have a little warm-up chat before we officially start the show about the fact that the second floor at SFMOMA, which is with a permanent collection, is free through almost the end of May 29th, I think. And Jeanette, off the top of your head, do you have a favorite painting on the second floor of SFMOMA?
Oh my goodness.
Not a really hard question.
Well, yeah. Well, one, it's a particularly hard question. Two, I am not a very, I have a very hard time ever picking a favorite in anything because there are so many good things. But I think SFMOMA, it's particularly difficult to pick a favorite. So I'm gonna take that question right back to you, Rodney.
Okay. My favorite painting on the second floor is actually not up on the wall right now, and it would be the Robert Bechtel Alameda Gran Torino.
Oh, yeah.
And that is a painting of a car in front of a house in Alameda, an actual house. And I was doing one of these programs, and the guy who lives in that house was actually on the Zoom program. That was pretty cool. But I'd say of the paintings that are up now, we're going to see one of them. There's a Joan Brown that is it's kind of the only Joan Brown, maybe one of two that's on display now at SFMOMA.
Yeah.
And also there's a really nice Wayne Thiebaud with some lots of food, one of those food ones, and a Robert Arneson sculpture.
Oh, that's
called
fun.
Smorgy Bob. That's going to be my favorite.
Yeah. There's always something good to see.
Well, there is, and it's free. And actually, I'm trying to get Community Living Campaign to change the show I'm doing towards the end of April. I'm going to make it about the second floor. We're going to have a discussion of a bunch of my favorite paintings in other artworks there.
Oh, that's so perfect. Yeah.
But we're at 1 o'clock, and we'll have Nikki Tresvina from Community Living Campaign. Nikki, why don't you launch the program?
Okay, hi. Thank you, Rodney and Jeanette. Glad you're here with us today. So welcome back. We had a bit of an absence, and we're so glad Rodney's back. There was a family tragedy, and we're with you, Rodney, and we had a lot of sentiment, for you over the last few weeks. So we're glad to see you again. And the Community Living Campaign is a organization in San Francisco. We support seniors and people with disabilities through advocacy and through programming like these Zoom programs. We also have exercise classes, and we have a lot of tech support for seniors and people that are disabled who want to catch up, who feel like there's a gap. We think there's a generation gap. Well, this generation gap is tech. So we're trying to make sure that people, are comfortable with tech because we can't escape it now, right? Anyhow, so I will put my email in the chat and the link to our events in the chat. If you want to catch up with us that way, that'd be great. And I'm kind of being on the quiet side today. I've got a cold, so carry on, everybody. And I'm here, but you may not see me that much or hear me that much.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, thank you, Nikki. And yeah, it's true. I missed the last Art Viewing Adventures, and then last week was our normally scheduled day. We had a memorial for my dad. And the one thing I'll say about that is my dad's favorite activity in the world was reading, and he also reviewed books. But my favorite activity is doing programs like this, doing my tours and my events. So it really helps me feel better to be with all of you. And I want to thank everybody for all the kind things that have been said since I lost my dad. I'm joined by Jeanette Pettibone, my friend and fellow guide at the San Francisco Unnamed Museum of Art, SFMOMA. Also, Jeanette, you're also with the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about it's now closed, but the Joan Brown exhibition at SFMOMA. We just loved it so much. We already did a part 1 program, which is recorded and available on my YouTube channel. And we can, if you send me an email, if you want access to that, we can make that available. But we wanted to do part 2 because we had so many paintings we wanted to talk about, and we kind of ran out of them when we did this about a couple months ago. And Jeanette, you and I, we just love talking about this stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think I've ever done a part 2 with you before, but this show definitely deserves a part 2. I hope that those of you who live in San Francisco or nearby and were able to visit it, have visited the show. I know not all of you it was possible, but even if you haven't, we've got a few more here for you to enjoy.
Yeah, and you'll see her up in lots of different museums. There is a really nice catalog of the SFMOMA exhibition. Well, actually, I think it's originally from the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Most of the libraries have that available. You could check that out and enjoy that. And Jeanette and I love this thing so much, we both bought the catalog. But let's go ahead and get started, and we'll start with this one that we had on that title slide, The Bather. This one was actually not in the 7th floor gallery, but on the 3rd floor. Haven't checked to see if it's still there. It might still be up. It's really, really magnificent. It's this diptych, so 2 canvases put together, and it's got this pool of water and a person who Jeanette and I both have to believe this is another one of her many self-portraits. This is her portraying herself. If someone doesn't see it that way, we'd love to hear from you about that. And I'll just throw a question out there to the group. What do you think the mood is of like what's going through her mind? Maybe an emotion that you sense from her in this picture. And feel free to use chat, or you could even unmute if you want. We're not a big group, so just go ahead and unmute and share your thoughts on, how is she portraying herself? And maybe I'll throw that at you, Jeanette. What do you think?
Well, last time we did this, we saw lots of self-portraits, and in this one, I see something a little different, and not just because she's a cat. There's something really beautiful about the way she's painted her face even. I just feel like this expression on her face is one of serenity and kind of happiness. There also, to me at least, there seems some engagement in the eyes. And I think we had some comments in some of her self-portraits from the 70s where she looked like a little lost or a little surprised or maybe even blank, whereas here I see something a little different. I'd love to hear what other people have to say about maybe her eyes or her face here before getting into the obvious neck below.
When I was up there, I started really paying attention to her presentation in all the paintings that she'd done. Yeah. And I started wondering, well, in which of these paintings is she the happiest? And I decided this was the one where I thought she was happiest. And in some of the others, I get different emotions from her. For me, I find this, it's almost it's very personal about her, but it's really personal for me too, because she is very close in age to my mother. Mm-hmm. And I'm very close in age to her son, Noel Neary, that he's portrayed in many of her paintings. And so I kind of relate to this as like a woman who is trying to make her way in as a mother, as a wife, and as a painter. My mother was a librarian, but she had to balance those things also.
So why is it called number 5? Are there others of her bathing, or what's the number 5 about?
I'll say I don't know the answer to that. She is often portrayed as swimming. I didn't see any other bathing pictures in this exhibition, but she might have had, maybe this is something she did other versions of? Do you have any idea, Jeanette?
I don't know. I'm assuming that it's part of a series. She has other series that she numbers. I'm trying to look up now if I can see anything about the rest of the bathers, any other bathers in the series, and I'm not seeing anything off the top of my search. But yeah,
One of the things we
I
really get,
assume there's a series.
yeah, she was very prolific. It's
Yeah.
amazing how many of these, even though she died way too young, she really produced a lot of work.
We have a question in the chat from Julianne. Don't cats usually dislike water?
Yes, I know. I thought
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. So she related very much to cats, and cats as sort of what we might call her spirit animal, or, harnessing the power of cats for good, not like, for instance, I forgot the name of the goddess in Egyptian mythology that is related to cats, but she very much identified with that. But she was an avid swimmer. She swam in the bay. She fought for women to be able to join the dolphin club. There, very much a swimmer. And here she is. She has titled it The Bather, and she's sitting by a pool of water as a cat. So that's a great question.
And not just a cat, but a big cat, a
Big
tiger.
cat. Yeah.
So we'll go back in time a little bit, and Jeanette, why don't you talk to us about this one?
Yeah, so we were talking. I mentioned that one of the things I liked about that previous The Bather was her different eyes, and this is sort of backing up to show a self-portrait from the 70s. We showed some other ones in part one, if you were here to join us in the part one of Joan Brown. I love this painting. I just think it is wonderful. The bright red background that she's painted herself against here, and then holding a big fish in one hand and a paintbrush in the other. I just think it's wonderful. And she's got her cat at the bottom. And for me, the mood of this seems a little bit different. There's something still joyous for me, but I don't know. I'll hopefully you can make some comments in the chat about whether you think that this looks joyous to you or not, or what sort of mood you get from this. So questions and comments in the chat would be great. But if you can see her eyes, it feels like they're a little bit different than the eyes that we got in The Bather. They're a little
Avoiding.
Let me go back to The Bather.
Yeah.
So we've got those eyes.
And I mean, some of it just might be also stylistically, The Bather is very 80s. It definitely, like, the whole style of it reminds me of the 80s. But this one, the eyes are a little less engaged, at least to me. I don't know if you feel the same way, Rodney.
Yeah, it's a different mood, and you said joyous, and I don't disagree with that. I think the choice of red for the background is really interesting. Red can mean a lot of different things, but I almost get a sense there's humor in this to me. Yeah. Something about the cat and the fish. Here she is with her painting clothes, and yet she's holding this enormous fish.
And I love that the paintbrush is yellow paint, which looks like it's the color of the fish. So it almost feels like she is, as the artist outside of the painting, painting the fish that color. And then as the artist inside the painting, almost like she's painting the fish that color too, which I find really fun.
I mean,
and of course,
Yeah, we often like, these are, as I said, very personal. I think I even saw her referred to as almost like a diarist, recording the events of her life. And 1970 was, I think, a kind of difficult time in her life where one of her 4 marriages was breaking up. I don't know if you really see that here, but we have that context. And it's a kind of
Yeah.
blank expression she has, right?
Yeah.
And definitely comparing that to the bather that we just saw, like I said, the bather is a much happier portrayal, I think.
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
It
Another,
almost,
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Nick.
thank you. It almost looks like the same figure in the fish behind Rodney. That person is in the fish's mouth.
Yeah.
Funny you should bring that up, because that is actually what we're talking about next.
Okay.
And this one, I have to say, we both really loved this, the bolty fish, and so much great thing, so much going on here that's really fun and interesting. I love the fact that she's portrayed herself. So here, like, she's bigger than the fish, although the fish is still really, really big. And in here, she is like in the mouth of the fish. Right. And but it's still, if you look closely, and I know it's probably hard to really zoom in on a computer, but she is wearing her artist clothes, and you can see paint on the clothes. She's got the gloves on, similar to these gloves that she's wearing here. So she's still like, she's similar to how she's portrayed. Maybe even the expression is similar to the other expression. And then instead of that red background, you get this incredible blue background.
Yeah, I love that this is her 80s version of her with the fish. The red background, that was her 70s version of her with the fish, and this is her 80s version. And I love, even as beautifully bright as the colors seem across the screen, it was luminous in person. Just the colors glowed in a way that was just lovely. And I find it so interesting that in this case, the fish is so much larger than she is. She's almost lost in the fish. Whereas in the one before, she's got a good hold on the fish. That this is a different fish altogether, but the way that she represents herself and the fish is beautiful and whimsical and fun. And I just really enjoy this.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny, like, she's in the mouth of the fish, but the fish isn't going to eat her, right?
Yeah.
The fish is maybe the fish is smiling.
It
Like,
looks like the fish is smiling. Yeah.
They're very simpatico. I will say that this was the painting that if I could have managed it, I would have stolen this painting from the galleries. I would love to have this hanging in my house.
Yeah. It's quite large. Just to give you a sense, we didn't put any of the dimensions on here, but it would have taken up probably a full wall of your house too. It's quite a large painting, which
Is it
just
there too?
seems beautiful when you're standing in front of it.
I don't remember it.
Oh, someone needs to mute. Who might that be?
We gotta take them.
Hey, Jennifer, if you can figure out who's talking, go ahead and mute them. So we anything else on this one, Jeanette, before we move on?
Well, I think what we're moving on to is a perfect continuation of this, because you see here, she's wearing the same clothes as she was wearing in the fish. She's in the same position as she is in the fish. And it's the same year she painted this one, which I think we've seen also in part 1 of this series of Joan Brown, is that there are, so when she, like during a year, she'll work on pieces that have some connection to each other in some way. They're separate pieces, but there's some idea that she's working on and something she's thinking about. And one of those things is her and sort of her place in the world and her place with the fish, her place here, she's in the studio.
Yeah, you get the sense maybe she wore the same clothes all the time.
Yeah.
She's got pretty much the same clothes in both
Well,
of
that
these.
could be your painting outfit once it gets coated in paint.
That's smart, right?
Yeah.
And
And she's got
yeah,
this,
yeah.
she's got those gloves on still too.
I love how abstract the background of this is. You know,
Yeah.
you see, you know, so it's like she started out as an abstract painter. We would definitely think of her as a figurative, kind of realist painter. But she's showing us this abstract background. And what do you think she's doing with her hands, Jeanette? What's going on there?
I don't know. She's got them in the same position in both of this one and the fish. So one hand is holding what looks like something to do, whether it's paint or whether it's paint thinner or something to be used. And then on top is the hand with the paintbrush. So, but it is interesting that it's like holding sort of like a sphere it makes. And I don't know if there's any more significance to that than just that's how she painted, was with holding with one hand and painting with the other, or if there's something more significant about that particular position.
Maybe she painted this painting first, and then she did the other painting, and she said, I'm going to take the me from that first painting and put it in this painting.
Yeah.
Or so. It's I love narrative, and I love thinking about what are the stories behind all this. And you're probably all thinking, well, what is the story behind this, Rodney? Didn't you research this to find out? And that's not what I do. I like us to tell our own stories. And Joan Brown's paintings are really all about the narrative of her life. And you know, I imagine you could write a really good biography of her and probably get at some of the detail of all this. But I kind of like the mystery of looking at the images and trying to think through that for ourselves.
Yeah. And who is this woman, and why has she made these choices about how she represents herself?
Yep,
If you and you know, it made me ask myself, if I were going to paint myself as an animal, what animal would I paint myself to be? And maybe all of you can think about that for yourselves as well. Would you be a tiger like like Joan Brown, or a bird, or a different animal?
Has she done something around her eyes again on this portrait?
well, I have to cop to this not being the greatest image. I think a very similar, they're not so
Yeah.
different from these eyes here, I think, when you look
There's
at it.
often a lighterness around the eyes in many of her self-portraits, not all of them, but almost you know, this like lightness. And I think of it, because she was also an avid swimmer, I think of it sort of like the goggle, where she wore her goggles was just a little bit lighter than the rest of her face, because she swam outdoors. And I don't know if that's right or not. But for me, that's how I always pictured it, is that just around her eyes, it's always a little bit lighter, because she spent all of her, all that time outdoors swimming, and probably got more color in the rest of her face around her goggles.
That's
a great observation, Nikki. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this painting is on the back cover of the catalog. So you can kind of study it there. It's really, really great self-portrait.
Yeah.
We'll move on to the next, unless there's any last thoughts, Jeanette?
Just to notice how she creates the space that she's in. It's something I'm going to want to talk about in the next paintings we see. Is you know, here we sort of get an idea of where the floor and the wall is, maybe, maybe the floor is all the color, and that line there is where the floor meets a white wall that has painting on it. Or maybe she's actually standing in front of a completely painted wall that has these two things. There's a little bit of ambiguity here where it's not so definite and decided and clear that is the floor, that's not the floor. And that's kind of something I enjoy with her paintings, is that there can be some ambiguity there. So
If that's
you
the
wanna-
floor, she's gonna have a really unhappy landlord when she tries to move out.
Yeah.
So,
So this is so we're kind of moving back and forth in time during this part too. And this is one from the 70s as well, where I think she makes it pretty clear where the floor is and where the wall is. And she has this perspective point that you have right there between her and the dog, well, or the woman. The women in our paintings are often her, but here the title is Woman Preparing for Shower. You can see there's that sort of perspective point where you understand that the two walls and the floor meet right there between her and the dog. And so she is sort of giving you perspective. And in person, these tiles look very realistic. They look very much like we're in a shower here. Just a few other things I like to note is also we see still in the 70s, she's using all of these different patterns. We have one pattern for probably the robe that she's wearing before taking the shower, another pattern in the dog's mouth in a kerchief, I guess. And then the patterning at the top of the shower, this yellow and black, which we've seen her do yellow and black checks in other paintings as well, slightly different ones. And then, but this is really, for me, one of the few paintings that really gives you that perfect sort of perspective when you have a single person in a space. And then a lot more of the paintings are like this next one that I want to talk about some more.
yeah, and I'll just comment.
Yeah.
The one thing that strikes me about this one is the awkwardness of her position. And, we know that she's very adept at doing different things with her figure. So she obviously, this isn't like she did this because she isn't a good at depicting people. But what do you make of that, Jeanette? What's going on there?
I'm just thinking like she's trying to get out of the robe and it got stuck. And
Yeah,
sometimes we make these positions. For me, that's what it looks like, is that she's just like trying to get out and maybe it got stuck.
there's like an awkwardness there that
Yeah.
is intentional, right?
Yeah.
That's real interesting.
Yeah. And it is very intentional. Everything that she does is intentional. So yeah.
And then what the dog's doing is kind of curious too.
Yeah, I know. Like, why is the dog in the shower?
Why is the dog in the
Yeah.
shower? Yeah, like how many people do that, right?
Yeah. And this doesn't look, I mean, I don't know, but it doesn't look like a personal shower. It looks like and maybe I'm colored by the fact that I know that she swam out in the bay, and so she probably was showering at one of the clubs near the bay instead of going home. But it feels there's something sort of industrial, or it feels like a shower that's shared. But here we have the dog.
That's like a dolphin club dog.
Yeah.
That's how you got your towel. At the dolphin club.
But it's kind of nice because it creates this balance where it's she's the bigger vertical, but we've got this other little vertical that gives this sort of a balance and a nice line through the painting.
But that shadow under her chin really bothers me.
Oh, yeah.
It almost looks like from my poor eyesight, it almost looks like a light beard of a guy. Because if it didn't say woman preparing for a shower, I would say that could be a man or a woman.
Or a strap from the shower cap.
Yeah.
Oh, is it a strap?
I don't think so, but it could look like that. I
Yeah.
think it is just a shadow, but
Yeah.
Yeah, and it almost to me looks like the grout of the shower tiles too,
does.
which wouldn't make sense on her face, but that there's like that continuous line of the grout, and then it kind of goes up into her face. But yeah,
It's distracting to me.
yeah.
Why don't we move on to the next, which also has a check pattern?
Yeah, so this is more what I often expect to see in her paintings that I really like is, you know, we do have a floor and a ceiling, and we do have this perspective where we see the wall, the various walls, we see where the floor connects with the walls, but there's something a little off in the perspective. Because we have her figure, the figure in the middle of the room is it's not clear. It looks almost like the floor has come up and flattened against her. So it's very interesting. It's also, I wonder about on the right-hand side, is that a window? Is that a painting? It has this very dramatic sort of lower angle going with the going up against the floor, you know, with that diagonal, but then the car is very horizontal there. If it is a window, is that the place you'd want a window? Which I mean, it looks like a changing room. She's, you know, in the middle of changing or disrobing. Do you want a window of that size in that space? Or, you know, if it is a painting, the painting angle seems a little off too. And so I find this fascinating. I don't know, Rodney, what do you think about this?
Well, of course, it makes me think of Rene Magritte, and you know, he had lots of paintings of what could be windows or could be paintings. So that's part of it. And the perspective isn't quite right, which is another thing that he did. So there's, you know, there's a surreal quality to a lot of her paintings. But there's so much more going on. And then you get to the narrative, and you know, whose car is that?
Yeah.
It's kind of ominous, you know, and it's kind of this old fashioned car, right? Like, you know, you'd think some kind of hard-boiled detective might be in the car, you know, Sam Spade, the Maltese Falcon, something like that going on, right?
Yeah, it looks very noir.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the way that the street light is creating this sort of swirl in the sky.
Fog, right?
Yeah, and if that is a window, there's something voyeuristic about it. Sort of voyeuristic from two different angles, from the possibility that there's this car out there, like maybe I don't see anyone in it, but anyone maybe could be looking in from the outside. But then there's also us as the viewer looking straight at the painting of her in a state of undress in a room that looks like maybe it is a dressing room, or not, but there's something sort of doubly voyeuristic about it, of this space, and where's the privacy? Is there privacy? Do we care about privacy in this
Well,
painting?
you can't see her face, so she's kind of hidden herself.
Yeah. So
And
there is hiding. Yeah.
and you know, if you don't accept my premise that there's a story behind all these paintings, like, how can this not suggest a story? This would definitely, I think, be exhibit A in my case, that she is a storyteller. but she's a storyteller in an unusual way. She's wants there to be stories that we kind of tell ourselves. You know, we're going to pull our own narratives from these things, and we're not going to know. You know, maybe if you could have cornered her at some exhibition, maybe she would have told you her idea of the story. But I'm kind of glad that we don't know that.
Yeah.
We get to tell the story to ourselves.
Yeah. And I just really love her green shoes.
Yeah.
She
Okay.
often has these really brightly colored shoes. There were the bright yellow ones in her Alcatraz paintings, and here we've got these green shoes. And I love it.
Yep. I mean, we'll never get to know her because she's been gone a long time, but we kind of do get to know her from these paintings.
Yeah. Oh, we've got a good comment from the chat. Julianne says, the subject can see what's behind her in the mirror. Only she knows. I like that.
Oh, so she's been waiting for that car to pull up.
Yeah. She's got it. She's the only one that can see. Yeah, I like that.
And is she smoking?
Yeah. So it's a little hard to see on this particular slide, but yeah, off to the right of the painting, her hand is down, and then she has a cigarette in there, and there's this trail of smoke, which again to me feels very noir, but maybe that's also, you know, the 70s, more people smoked and it was probably more normal for just everyone to be smoking. But yeah, that smoke, kind of that smoke trail leads up towards the window in the car, and that all gives it sort of this like detective feel.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of Elvis Costello's song "Watching the Detectives." Is playing in my mind as I look at this.
Yeah.
And you know, she looks so relaxed, right, with a cigarette and her legs crossed, but there's no back on the chair. It's kind of an odd position because
Yeah.
she looks like she's just, you know, resting, relaxing, but there's no back on that chair.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
a good point. It's just a little bench, huh?
Yeah, it's
Yep.
a little bench. It's kind of weird.
And she would have been about, so 1975, I think she was born in 1938, so she'd be about 37 years old. So
Yep.
guess the back problems haven't happened yet. So we move on to the next.
Yep.
So we've got more cats. If you want more Joan as cat, here she is, half person, half cat. Harmony. So harmony, that's her idea of harmony. We've got the sun and the moon. You know, she's got her paintbrush and her glove on. Different painting outfit. This is I don't know, maybe the 1982 painting outfit. And we don't really know what her expression is in this. You know, we kind of, you know, she cuts it in half. So seems like, again, blank expression on the human face, maybe a smile on the cat face. Kind of a confident, the cat has a confident arm gesture there. What do you make of this, Jeanette?
Well, I just, of course, I love her as cat. I think it's so perfect. It's interesting because the bather that we started with, it was her face on a cat body, but here she's got it's like herself. She is too, just like night and day is all part of a 24-hour period. We have sunlight and moonlight. The entirety of Joan Brown is human and cat. And that she almost becomes cat at night, but not in any ominous or dark way. This is harmony. But instead, like you mentioned, the arm gesture, there's it feels like a superhero pose. I don't know, that arm, like it feels like confident, but also sort of the superhero pose that you know, yes, she's painter by day, but she is superhero cat by
Well,
night.
all cats are superheroes
Yeah.
in their own minds, at least.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, this again, I want to just sort of point out what Rodney's said all along is that these paintings are really personal, and these are about her and her life and her feelings. And I think that, along the way, some of her gallery representation was like, hey, you should still do those paintings that we're selling and making lots of money. And you should still, go back to your old style, keep doing the old stuff. And she was like, no, I don't paint for others, I paint for myself. And that's something that I feel like you can really see in her work, is that she's painting for herself. So we're getting, what we get out of it is a lot of her joy in painting for herself, I think. And this painting for me is all about that. This is me. Let me show you what I want to paint, what I want to do, who I want to be, how I want to represent myself.
Yeah, Mar says she's the original Catwoman.
Yeah. Yep.
And I want to expand on what you said, Jeanette. She's painting for herself, and her subject is herself.
Yeah.
The musician that she reminds me of the most is Loudon Wainwright, whose songs, whose whole body of work is almost entirely about himself, his family, his world, and he's just decided to go with that. And I think she has too. And there's a certain cost to doing that. At least there is for Loudon, I think. But it's also the thing best in the world is your world, your life. And I think maybe she's really courageous to be doing this.
Yeah. And I think it's really also pretty exciting, because as she is experimenting in her world, or maybe not experimenting, but learning and discovering new things and being curious and inquisitive, we get to see that happening in her paintings too. And the sense of humor and a little bit of whimsy and joy, which makes her so compelling for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's also a woman in the world of art, a woman in kind of a man's world, and she's unapologetic about who she is.
Yeah.
I mean, she's good friends with Jay DeFeo, who, great abstract painter in the San Francisco scene. Jay DeFeo changed, Jay was kind of a nickname that did not allude to what her gender was. And you couldn't tell from her paintings that she was a man or a woman. But
Yeah.
Joan Brown, unapologetically who she is.
And I think I read somewhere once about Jay DeFeo, someone saying, and if this wasn't quite right, this is something that has been said to other women artists, but you're so good, you paint like a man, and I mean, whereas it gets better all the time, I wouldn't say everything's completely equitable yet even, but when she started her art career, for sure, she had multiple forces. There was the force of being a woman in a mostly male-dominated art world. And then there's also the being a West Coast painter at a time when she started out, when New York, and New York still is the center of the art world at the moment, maybe not forever, but at the time she started, the abstract expressionists in New York had a very masculine style, and there was the art critics that put them very elitist as well. So there was this elitist art style that was very masculine, that was all centered around New York. And here she is, a woman artist on the West Coast, where a lot of the elite art critics were like, West Coast, they're a quaint little provincial art scene, and then being a woman within that. But I think, and I know we've talked about it, Rodney, is we both think that that gave her some freedom maybe too. That she's like, well, yeah, okay. I have this freedom of not having to adhere to this, elitist culture, and I can be doing the work that I want to do.
Yeah, and we on Art Viewing Adventures, we love our California artists.
Yeah.
One of my absolute favorite works is Robert Arneson's sculpture called California Artists, which is a self-portrait with beer cans and weed, and yeah. And so Joan would totally fit in with that.
Yeah.
Kenji made a comment that this image would make a fun iPhone case.
Yeah.
Go for that, man. That's a great idea,
Yeah. I'm surprised, yeah, that it isn't. Yeah.
Could probably do that. All right, let's move on. This is a sculpture, the Cat and Rat Obelisk, that was in front of the gallery. And you can see the rats are kind of up here and on the bottom. And then there's this cat kind of seeing them. So this is like a nice nod to Egyptian culture, which revered cats and had obelisks. I believe there's a Joan Brown obelisk in, there's a couple places in San Francisco that have them. MacArthur Park, if I'm not mistaken, has one, and also by the Rincon Center. There's some that are still just out in public to enjoy.
Yeah, so field trip for anyone. You can actually, even though the Joan Brown exhibit at SFMOMA is over, you can still go see some of these obelisks.
Yeah, now her work is going to be scattered among our local museums and in public. I know that the DeYoung has some.
Yep.
And I think the Crocker Art Museum up in Sacramento, among other places. How about Oakland Museum? Do you know, Jeanette? Does Oakland Museum have one?
I don't know.
To look into that.
But I would be surprised if they didn't, because they have so many great California artists.
Yeah.
But I don't know off the top of my head.
We'll move on. Dancers in a City. This was one of our favorites. Jeanette, what did you think was going on with this?
Yeah, so this is another one from the 70s. We've been kind of ping-ponging back and forth 70s and 80s. And of course, I think you all can see the skyline, which brings us kind of near and dear to us. But I love the energy of this painting. So I look at the positions of the dancers. They are full throttle in dancing. They are leaning back, leaning forward. There's nothing static or upright about this. These are amazing. Look at the shoes again. We've got some bright yellow shoes.
But not like on different feet, right?
On different feet. Yeah. It's the action and the movement in here. And then the one on the right, that leg that's like tucked all the way. Yeah, we've got this leg in front and then the black pants. And if you look at that back leg that goes all the way up like that, these are people having a great time. And there's something really exciting to me about this painting and the joy and the energy. It's not always easy to capture energy in something static as a painting. And I think that this does a great job focusing on the hands, on the keyboard, focusing on these positions of the dancers. What do you think, Rodney?
So she's making a lot of interesting choices in all this.
Yeah.
For example, that like half the keyboard is red.
Yeah.
What's with that? I don't know. It's just really interesting. The dancers, I think it is joyous. It could almost be violence, it's like on this borderline of, exuberance, heading towards chaos and violence, perhaps.
Well, I wonder, part of that, I can see that, but part of that for me is the choice of this, the dancer with the red and blue stripes.
Mhm.
There's something about the red and blue stripes that kind of mirror a canonical prison uniform.
Right,
To
right. I
me,
get that.
yeah, that it's not the stripes themselves. There's just something maybe from, Halloween costume, kind of prison costumes.
It's also missing a leg.
It's also missing
that's-
a leg. Where'd the other half of that leg go? Yeah. Yeah. And there's something, when you think about someone hovering over you with an arm raised, yeah, I can see. Yeah, I see that now.
The year is 1973, and maybe I'm looking at this through 2023 eyes, but one of the things I notice about the dancers is that their genders are not specific. And, if if you're gay, you might say, well, I kind of see myself being represented here, which is something nice and something that we associate with San Francisco culture. Skyline, clearly, I think that's San Francisco. I can't help noticing, probably not her intention, but black and orange, Giants fans. Nice choice there, Joan, right?
Yeah.
And clearly she is celebrating San Francisco, obviously, it was a very important place in her body of work. We talked a lot about that in the Joan Brown Part 1 program, which I'll just say again, was recorded. And if you want to throw your email in the chat, I'd be happy to email you a link to the recording of Part 1, where we talk about particularly her paintings of her swimming and the ones with Alcatraz in the background. Lots of San Francisco stuff there too.
We have a comment in the chat that says 3 of the hands look like fists. Yeah, that's I think that's where some of the, yeah, exactly, the possible violence there. For me, I didn't get that right away until you said that either. Is I just felt like it was joy, but now I see it too. It's interesting. Another thing, we were talking about the keyboard. The hands playing the keyboard are gloved, which could just represent a gloved hand playing a keyboard, but she has gloves on all of her self-portraits. Or many of them. I don't think these are the same kind of gloves. She usually has more translucent gloves, but I just thought about that because this is a painting where we don't necessarily see her in it, or not immediately. Maybe we can imagine she's the one way off to the right, that's her leg, and or but it's not obvious that she's in it. And maybe how does she fit into this sort of painting when so many of her paintings she's in them, and it's part of her story. How does this fit into her story is a question I ask.
Yeah, where's Joan in this one?
Yeah,
Is she playing the piano? Maybe she's playing the piano.
maybe she's playing the piano.
And
know.
just I really like artists that kind of have a brand. Magritte again is like a classic example. You totally know when you're looking at a Magritte, and I think Joan Brown has a lot of those elements too that establish a Joan Brown brand, including the gloves, including shoes. Yeah, you know it. If you know Joan and you love her paintings, you kind of know when you're in their presence.
Yeah. Another comment by Karen. 2 arms are one. Yeah, we see here with the red and blue striped person, and their dance partner, that arm just sort of melds into one, the arm that connects them, just like there's no, like the bottom leg sort of disappears, you know, their arms sort of meld into one. So yeah, it's a really interesting observation there.
Does anybody out there think, well, because of those discrepancies, does that mean it doesn't really work? Do you accept it, even though it does have those, you know, when you look closely, it has these, what you might call problems, but that it still works? Love to hear thoughts on that.
I think it still works and it gives us more things to think about.
Yeah, I like that. And I think you see that in Magritte's work, things that are not right when you really probe, and yet you still accept them as he's created a different reality. That's what I think, but we don't all have to agree on that.
Yeah.
Oh, I love her dancers.
Yeah.
It's
You want to say more about that, Karen?
So their movement is so good on all that whole series. I like the little boat too that was in this room with the dancers that has the cutout dancers on it. It's just fantastic.
Yeah.
That was a sculpture, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have a picture of that in our slides, but yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, I took pictures of that. I have
Yeah.
And Mar Ritchie says, I don't see it as a problem either. It's part of this energy. Yeah. So I think that's a great accomplishment for a painter, to be able to kind of play around with reality and still have us accept what they presented us with.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next.
So I just thought it would be nice to see, she didn't do a lot of sculptures. She did some of her cutout kind of sculptures like you were mentioning, Karen, but this was one of her early works, 57 to 60. And I find this very charming. I like birds very much. So but not just that it's a bird. If you can see the materials, that's just cardboard in the back there, and twine, and you know, a few materials that are not, you know, not fancy art materials. These are just a couple pieces of wood put together, but for me it's made something really charming. I find this bird just, yeah, charming, but I don't know, I'd like to we have a comment, bird 911. How do you what do you think about this?
Mhm.
Yeah, this wasn't one of my favorite things, Jeanette. So I would let you steal this one.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to distract the guard for you, though.
Yeah, I don't know why I just really enjoy this. Maybe part of it too is this was her experimenting with something that didn't end up being her style at all. This is very much, to me, influenced by her husband, Manuel Neri, who is the father of her son, Noel, that we've seen some of the Noel paintings in the first part. But to me, it feels like she was trying things out, discovering the artist that she was going to become, but still keeping some of that whimsy in it. Something a little funny, a little fun that I really liked about this.
I like the color contrast. I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah.
So I do like that. And I think we have, should I go to the next slide with
Yeah.
it's got, oh, that's okay. That's where we see the painting that has
Yeah.
kind of
So
similar.
this is also one of her early paintings, and you can see how it's an early painting just by the way she's put the paint on the canvas. You can see those brush strokes, and you can see the thickness of paint. And so even if we didn't tell you, you could probably guess that this is not quite the same as like if we think about where we started with her as a cat, the smoothness of the paint and the image. Here you see the thickness. But yeah, she used the bird. She put the bird on top of the fridge and then used it as as part of a prop in one of her paintings, one of her early paintings.
We're kind of running out of time. There's that refrigerator painting again.
Yeah.
Just a couple more to talk about. This is a very, very large work that is both sculpture and painting. And let's see what.
Let's see if we can get to the vanity, since that's one that's still up and hanging on the second floor,
We'll go
and
to
that
vanity,
you
which
can go
is,
visit.
give me a sec to
Yeah.
find that, because yeah, here we go.
Let's end there. Yeah.
So the vanity is on the second floor in the free part of the museum. Really want to encourage everybody to take advantage of that while it's, I think it's through May 29th. Possibly they'll extend it, but Jeanette, like, this is a good one to ask, like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I think that this is pretty amazing. So we've seen a bunch of her self-portraits, her as woman, all of these spaces that we've looked at. And then here, it's so fascinating the way that she is in the mirror, but not in the mirror. I just find that amazing. And she does this with the use or the lack of color and the lack of details that is just absolutely fascinating. You know, as Julianne kind of pointed out in a comment earlier, with the mirror in front of her face in that one painting, only she could see what was going on really behind her. And I feel like here, you know, only she really knows where she is in this space and what she's seeing. And we're not, I feel like I don't even know how I'm seeing her. Rodney, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that, like, we see kind of an image in the mirror, but it's just an outline. There's no face. It's not really colored in. And then off to the right, we see a hand, we see legs, but again, we don't see the body. And so we know she's here, but she isn't really revealed. And this is the person who is, like, the large body of her work are all about herself. So here she's showing this, you know, it's called the vanity. Like, vanity is kind of us thinking about what we're secretly proud of, I guess.
Yeah, it's not woman at the vanity, like so many of her painting, woman in the room, woman in the self-portrait. This is the vanity, and it's like she's the prop.
Yeah. And then this thing going on with the lamp in the way the paint, the color changes. That's really interesting. Like, what does that lamp represent? The handles on the vanity are like horseshoes.
Yeah.
You know, what's with that? Art museum guides love paintings like this because there's so many questions we can ask. It can take you in so many different directions, and there's really no right or wrong answers. So I've been to the museum a bunch of times and parked myself with friends in front of this thing and had discussions of it, which, by the way, I have this idea, folks, that I might on the sly have little get-togethers of people on my email list to go to the museum and walk around and talk about the art in the museum. Now, the museum is not doing tours. This would certainly not be a tour, but it would be a bunch of friends who would go to the museum together, and someone like me might pose a question. It might seem like a tour, but it would just be a bunch of people talking about art together. So if that sounds interesting to you, pay attention to my emails that come out. I would keep the numbers of people doing this small so that the unnamed Museum of Art doesn't get mad at me. And yet here it is recorded for posterity, right? Well,
Yeah.
other thoughts on this? I see something, what's in chat? Please promote next week's program. We're going to be here 1 week from today. So normally we're the second and fourth Monday of the month, but the family events that we were talking about earlier kind of tripped us up a bit. So we will resume that. We'll be back on the 27th. And we've got a great program planned for you where we'll be talking about, I don't have my schedule in front.
Abstract works at the gallery. Abstract works. Does that ring a bell?
Yep, that's what it's going to be. We're going to be back. Great
Yeah.
discussion of abstract works. Well, to you, so tune back in a week. But Jeanette, what are your last thoughts on Joan Brown?
I just want to say thank you, Rodney, for letting me join you in this, because I love Joan Brown, as you may be able to tell by my face and my smile the whole time. This was such a great exhibit, and being able to talk about it for 2 times, 2 different parts, really delighted me. And so thank you, Rodney, and thank everyone that came, because whether you got to go to the show in person or you only were able to see it here with us, this work is amazing, and I am really happy to be able to share it with you.
Yeah, and Jeanette, I think you and I model the idea of like, it's just art should be discussed.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be this passive, quiet activity. And you're one of my favorite people to talk with art about. So we're hoping to do a lot more of these programs. And this show, Art Viewing Adventures, has been a great. I just love doing the show. I'm going to keep doing it. No chance I'm going to stop, because that's kind of what we love to do. So Nikki and Jennifer, we should always thank Jennifer Walsh, our technical moderator. She does so much. Nikki, thank you. Thank you, Living Campaign, for hosting us.
Yeah.
And we'll be back in 1 week, Monday at 1 o'clock, for more Art Viewing Adventures.